Hey, Mimi.
Hello, Raki.
How are you doing?
I'm really well, thank you. And you?
Great. Yes, I am fine. And it's funny, I think the last time I did one of these live discussions, obviously it was before the clocks had changed, and we seem to be plunged into darkness now. But I think autumn's a great time, in fact, to kind of really all the start. We're almost at the start of winter now, and I always think it's a great time to kind of really get going with a lot of these practices that are a little more internally focused as well. So I think it's fun times, really. For despite it getting dark, I got a real shock yesterday so I went for a walk and then suddenly it was sunset, and I was like, how can it possibly be sunset? But yeah, we've been plunged into darkness. So, but I don't know. It feels right to be talking about some of these more, I suppose, inward-looking practices.
They are inward. They're beautifully ways to relate and connect to people closest to us, people in our communities, people we don't know, the greater world, and they're really rich. But are people here now, or should we?
So yeah, I think people are beginning to join us. So if I keep looking off to the side, I'm not being crazy. I've got another device. I can't seem to see everything going on. So I'm just going to say hello to everyone, and hopefully people will start saying so.
Oh yeah.
So hi everyone.
Saying hi. Yeah.
If you are joining us, give us a wave or say hello, so I can see Lisa's there. So hi, Lisa, and I can see there are other people. Maybe they're being a bit shy. Don't be shy.
How do I
say hello
on the movement from modern life site to see who's here?
Yeah, so I can see Lisa said hi. We may be getting a few other comments as well. So yeah, Jenny, Nina, Kathy, lots of familiar faces. Jada, Anne.
Where on the movement from modern life Facebooks? I'm on the Facebook page.
It's in the movers group.
Oh, it's in the movers group. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, lots of very friendly and familiar faces and names to it. I say faces, I don't actually know what anyone's face looks like, really. I do know some of their faces, but very familiar names. So welcome everyone. It's really, I'm super excited because for me it is such a delight to be talking to Mimi, because as many of you will know, Mimi is one of my teachers. So it's like an extra layer of joy and delight to have this chance to really discuss some of this really rich topic with Mimi, and a lot of what I know about this I've learned from Mimi. So it's, welcome everyone. It's really nice to have you all here and to actually delve into something that I found really interesting. And I think I'm going to just start out by asking you a really simple questions. And I know people have been working through some of your classes, but really maybe we could talk a little bit about what the Brahma Viharas are, because I know that when I first came across these practices, and I didn't even know that what I first came across was metta practice, which is a loving kindness practice, and I didn't know it was part of a kind of a bigger whole. And in fact, I think the way that I first encountered metta, I loved that idea, but I found it a little bit, I don't know if intangible is the right word, but it was tricky to really fully understand and grasp. So I wondered if, because you have such a wonderful way of really explaining these things that make sense, if you just wanted to tell us a little bit more about these practices and what on earth this is. And we've suddenly come across a name and a term that people may be less familiar with. So
yeah, in English, they're known as the divine abodes or boundless states or sublime attitudes or four immeasurables. And all of those sound a little overwhelming. They sound kind of grand and, like you said, a little intangible. And how do we, as a normal average person getting through our life, touch into something that is boundless and infinite or sublime and immeasurable and basically what the Buddha described as how we awaken our hearts. So I understand where you're coming from, that it's touching into something quite ideal or something that we think maybe, oh, we don't have it in us. We're just this average, normal human being. And yet, this is the beauty of the practice, which is that what the practices speak to is the possibility within each one of us to cultivate a state that is really spacious and luminous and kind and compassionate and loving and caring and steady and full of joy for other people. And these are things that I think are just lifelines at times, especially right now when there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of polarization, a lot of difficulty, on a personal level, on a planetary level, on societal level, for sure, political level. For those who are a little geeky and interested, I don't know if just a straight up definition might be helpful, but the Brahma Vihara, they mean, Brahma means kind of the gods or the attitudes of gods who are infinite and boundless, and then abiding in the place of Brahma. Vihara is to abide. So, really living in an awakened and enlightened state where there is this potential for these attitudes to be effortless and natural and spontaneous and joyous to share.
And in fact, you talked about abiding and abodes, and really, I think one thing I really love about these qualities, but also about some of the practices associated with them, is that sense of the place we experience these things is in our bodies, and so it's where we abide as well. So it's not something kind of out there, but it's something that we can experience and share. So that sense of abiding, I think, and I think it's when I clicked that, it's a lived experience. These are lived qualities that a little light bulb went off in my head. And in fact, we've got the four different qualities, and I just wondered, Mimi, if you wanted to go through each of them slightly, because again, metta, which is one word we use, is often translated as loving kindness. So, which says to me there isn't a single word in English that encapsulates what that means. But likewise, I think with compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity, these are all words that obviously we understand and hear, but maybe that concept is a little bit different to perhaps the one we're more used to. So did you want to explain that? Oh, we've just got Heidi saying, just joined, bit late today, but just moved into my new home. Well, congratulations, Heidi, and wishing you lots of love in your new home. And Kat saying she's late. We've just got going, guys. We've been chatting generally, so you haven't missed much, and you're here for Mimi's definition of these four qualities, sort of heart awakening qualities.
Heart awakening, places you can abide infinitely and boundlessly. So yeah, they are metta, which you've mentioned. Metta means many things. It's love. The easiest way to understand it is love. It does have nuances, though. It's because love we think of sometimes, and it's kind of like, well, what does that mean? So they pair it or refine it a little bit by saying, well, it's actually goodwill. It's wishing yourself and others to be cared for, to be safe, to be happy, to be loved. It's a loving kindness is a very popular translation. I'm getting better with that translation, but I remember when I first came across some of these teachings, it was actually from my sister-in-law, and she gave me a book by Sharon Salzberg when I was still in college, and the title was Loving Kindness. And I was a grumpy, slightly skeptical college know-it-all. And I was like, oh, that's so saccharine, that's so, new agey, and I never read it.
Oh.
I wish I had. Yeah.
Have you read it now?
Yeah.
It's great.
It's amazing. But I was put off by the title. And then, I've also thought about it over the years. And if I said to my father, who was, scientist, engineer, and not very tolerant of kind of new age concepts, if Dad, you should practice some loving kindness, he would be like, but if I said, Dad, what if you could practice some care? He was like, oh yeah, I could do that. Care for others, care for oneself. So metta, this quality of wishing upon others that they be happy, healthy, safe, protected, at ease, and experiencing peace. And so metta, the near enemy to it, though, and this is an interesting thing because we can often misconstrue some of these concepts, especially when they go through the lens of different cultures and times. But the near enemy is attachment. Right? We might feel like love becomes controlling, or love it brings up fear or clinging, wanting the other person to love us back, expectation. And so we can kind of be aware of this as we're working with metta, that it's to foster a very spacious, open attention and genuine, sincere care for others without clinging, without attaching, in that sense of desiring and clinging, because that can, erode the real beauty of a pure sense of love when we start to think, oh, but did I say something that, that person's going to misconstrue because I'm not really actually sure if they approve of what I am doing or saying. And then we spin out stories and we lose contact with the spacious abiding. And then the next, and metta is actually the primary and foundational quality to cultivate. And cultivate is really important. In the Buddhist tradition, these practices have been seen as meditative practices, and they're referred to as cultivation practices, like metta bhavana, right? So bhavana means to cultivate in Sanskrit or Pali, karuna bhavana, mudita bhavana, upekkha bhavana. So it's something that we cultivate because they're not innate to us necessarily. So the next one, karuna, we cultivate compassion. And compassion is seeing what is going on in the world and not judging it, not turning a blind eye to it, but seeing it and feeling it, and actually opening ourselves courageously, so to feel the pain in the world, which is really hard to do, because very often if we're suffering, if we're having a hard time, our view becomes kind of myopic. My issues, my problems, my concerns, my dramas, and it can challenge us to move out of the sense of what's happening to me and think about other people. At the same time, it can get overwhelming. If we spend all of our time thinking about the refugee crisis, the victims of sexual assault and racism and poverty and disease and homelessness, and it could really overwhelm us.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because we talk about compassion fatigue. We don't talk about love fatigue. We can't get enough of love, but compassion. See, it's almost as if we have kind of encoded into our language a sense that there isn't enough compassion to go around, that we can somehow it can tire us or fatigue us, or
well, it only does that, I think, if we see it as the near enemy, which is pity. And pity separates. Pity says, I feel sorry for that person, and then it weighs me down. But compassion is very different. It's not being pulled down and depressed by the problems in the world. It's very much about recognizing that the problems that someone else is experiencing are also the problems that I have. It's about connection, and it's about opening oneself to the basic humanity and the difficulty of being like just a complicated, bumbling human being walking through the world, stumbling our way through, sometimes elated, sometimes just making mistakes, and then not thinking that it's just our own pain. To really open ourselves to the difficulties that other people are going through and to see them as our own, is compassion. It's standing in solidarity, as Martin likes to say, standing in solidarity with those who are having difficulty. And what that can do is reach across the aisle to people who we may not think we have much in common with, even, and say, you're having a hard time. I understand, because I'm also having a hard time. Marriage is the perfect way to do this.
And I was going to say, we can, even if someone is acting in a way that we find difficult or challenging or offensive, I think we can understand that quality of being human and having a hard time. So even if they are, you can still feel compassionate. You don't have to approve, do you? And I think that's where sometimes people can feel challenged by this. They sort of think, oh, well, if I send you love, that means I approve of what you're doing, when I really don't. But you can understand that person is also human, and
Exactly. Without having
just like us.
Exactly. And it often can be a very liberating quality, because whatever problems that we're going through, we know that there are other problems that are most likely far more difficult, And so it can reduce the closing into small self, and it can reduce the woe is me and everything is collapsing and crumbling around me. It's like, oh, I'm having a hard time. Maybe I don't feel well today, and it clouds my decision making. I feel kind of grumpy, and if I just extend compassion first to myself, say I am not feeling well, and then I also think about other people who might have been in a fire and had their house destroyed, might have been the victim of police brutality, might have had, horrors inflicted upon them. I feel my heart kind of open a little and feel tenderness for, someone else's experience, which is probably more difficult than mine. And it connects me to something greater than myself. And in that way, it's very spacious, right? And the boundless awakened heart, this bodhicitta, that means awakened heart, the boundless state of abiding where we're more free. That's the orientation of the teachings. And then mudita is the third one. And mudita is one that I think is really helpful on a basic practical level. It can shift so much quickly, because when we do get caught up in whatever drama of my problems, or it's very quick to start comparing oneself to other people and judging, or having a low opinion of someone who's having a good time and we're not. And mudita is sympathetic joy. And when people hear that, it's like, what does that mean? Well, it means that when someone else is having a good time, you're delighted for them. You're happy for them. And this can apply to so many situations. If something is going wrong in my circumstance, I might think, well, in someone else's life, somewhere in the universe, that is not happening to them, and I'm happy for them. Classic example is like when you're trying in London. When I used to live in London, you're trying to get to a tube, a tube that's like you see it at the station. You're running down the steps. You're in a hurry. And then right as you get to the bottom step, you hear that, like the door closes. And so very often the first response is to cuss under your breath, or just a little huff, or something that's expressing irritation. But if I can get faster than my conditioned response, and if I say mudita, right, then I'll think, wonderful. All those people are on their way. Wonderful. Sympathetic joy. They are on their way. When I used to teach in Soho, there was on Tuesday nights in the summer, there's an open window where the smell of smoke and drinking and laughter and people socializing would come up, and we're in there trying to be all whatever yoga. And someone started complaining, like, oh, can we close the window? And another person said, no, it'll get too stuffy. And I said, okay, right, I know what we're going to do. We're going to practice mudita. Now let's all think how amazing that they are all downstairs having such a nice time on a Tuesday night. And it shifts everything.
And I think this is a difficult one sometimes, isn't it? When and I think we've all been in the situation where you hear someone's news and you sort of think, well, it's great that they've got that, but and again, we're looking at near enemies there, aren't we? That
near enemies comparison, right? Seeing if others have something more than we do, or seeing that we have less than they do. It takes a lot to let go of comparison and envy and jealousy, competitiveness. I mean, capitalism is basically, it's fomenting competition and comparison and envy and jealousy, and that's the oil that keeps it running, the gas that feeds and fuels the development of Western capitalist society, right? So it's like, how do we let the seeds of envy lie dormant? Yeah, how do we start to focus on growing the flowers of generosity? And that's what it is, in a way. Sympathetic joy is a generosity of heart. You know, it's challenging because life happens and our heart contracts and it closes and we feel we don't have anything left to give, right? But this is why it's a cultivation. It's a steady, gradual warming and giving of space to ourselves and our heart and its capacity to hold joy for others in a generous way. I feel very comfortable talking about this, but as you know, my husband and I don't have kids. We have had 3 miscarriages, and it was very hard when all my friends were having kids. And there was one point in Beijing when I was teaching, and I started teaching, I was teaching pregnancy yoga and then mommy and baby yoga. And, I wasn't having a kid of my own. And eventually it was like, I'm not going to torture myself. I'm just not going to teach that anymore. But when my friends got pregnant, some of them, I could tell they were a little concerned about talking about it with me. They might, feel like I was being extra sensitive, or they didn't want to hurt my feelings. But then I was I was like, mudita, actually, I'm okay. I'm so happy for you. I really genuinely am happy for my friends back then. Now I'm really glad I don't have kids. It's fine. But like back then, it was like, it was a practice for me. It was like, okay, feel it, feel the comparison, feel the disappointment, feel the inadequacy, the shame, all of that. And then it has nothing to do with them, though. Like what they're experiencing is joy. They're pregnant, they're having a kid. So, generosity, I'm really genuinely happy for them. Yeah. And it freed me up so much. And I think it was very good for my friendships as well. Yeah. Growing the flowers of generosity and joy. I like to think of that rather than kind of, growing the kind of strangle weeds of envy and comparison and jealousy. 4th one, equanimity. This one is the toughest one, I think, for a lot of people, because, and I've been asked this question when I have taught about equanimity and upekkha. You say, well, it's so important right now in the world to take action, to do things, to, and we have this sense of equanimity as just detachment, and the near enemy of equanimity is indifference. And it's often conflated, unfortunately, with, I'm very equanimous, which means I'm unflappable and I'm disengaging from everything and non-action. But the teachings of the Buddha on equanimity are far from that. The leaning and the orientation of these practices is awakening the heart. And when we awaken our heart through equanimity, what we're saying is that we're cultivating an unshakable steadiness and an inner compassing and a sense of balance that's rooted deeply in love, compassion, mudita, sympathetic joy. And this helps develop insight from the steadiness. And that steadiness also helps us stay more calm, clear, and responsive to everything in life that's unfolding. And with equanimity, what we're looking at is cultivating a responsiveness and a steadiness to allow for the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows in life to be okay, like to meet all life. 10,000 joys, 10,000 sorrows. That's a Taoist phrase. It's just all things. We make room for joy and pain and sorrow and anger and beauty and happiness and celebration, shame, pain, success, failure. We make kind of I don't know, just a platform for the heart to meet all of that and then respond in a way that is appropriate and not just detached. It lets us really trust whatever grim corners we turn, we can trust that our heart will be ready for it and we can respond in the way that's appropriate.
And that enables us to, I guess, not be constantly being pulled into aversion or clinging either. That cultivating equanimity, and I think it kind of reminds me of the Serenity Prayer. You know, the one that's that I let me change what I can and leave alone what I. This is a terrible rendition. It's such a beautiful prayer, and I'm just completely making a pig's ear of it. And being able to, as you said, accept the 10,000 sorrows is tough. So we have a question, and I was just waiting till you talked about those 4 qualities, and in fact, it is whether you have any books to recommend. I think the questions from Susanna says, Heart Awakening Qualities. It's new for me. Have you any books you would recommend?
Oh, well, Sharon Salzberg book. Her book, Loving Kindness, is a really good place to start. Yeah.
I'll just type in Sharon Salzberg whilst we're doing that. So, yeah, that is, and it's a really approachable book. And I think when I read that, it made me understand what loving kindness, because I was just like having, I don't know, real challenges around how, but also about how to practice this. So,
that's
well, I was just going
an important point is how do we do this? How do we cultivate this? Because the 10,000 sorrows and 10,000 joys is quite big as a number. We start with the easy things, and with cultivation practices, they're very guided, and they start with classically they start with the self, but in the West that can trigger all kinds of difficulty to wish yourself equanimity, or wish yourself joy, or wish yourself care, wish yourself compassion. Interestingly, a student who was actually doing a course with my husband, she's Iranian, and when he was discussing how difficult it is to love yourself, she's like, what do you mean? Of course you love yourself. I mean, this starts from the self, and she found that just hard to get her head around. And I think in her upbringing, the foundation was very much yourself, and maybe in the Buddhist times that was also true. But if it's hard to start with yourself, you start with someone easy to love. A pet, a niece, a nephew, a baby, someone whose relationship you have with them is uncomplicated. And you start, for example, with metta, may you be happy. And you really let that person's face, presence come to heart and mind, and you genuinely take a moment and to internally verbalize that to that person, like, may you be happy, may you be safe, may you be healthy and well, may you be protected, may you be at ease and feel peace. And then, it's like a stage by stage progression. It goes from maybe someone else that's easy to love, then back to yourself, then to someone kind of neutral in your life. Like I often think of the mailman who used to deliver mail in London where I lived. I saw him regularly enough that I could imagine his face, but he's neutral. He's neither someone I really like or don't like. And then you go to someone you don't like, which is harder when we're working with this. And I have a sitting group, and one of the guys in my sitting group, sends metta to Donald Trump every single time. And for him, that's very difficult. It's very triggering, especially if we're, whatever, we feel things when someone that we don't like comes up, or if someone in your family was really triggering to you, it's difficult, but that's why you work up to that. And then it expands more globally, kind of to your family, to your community, to your city, to kind of rippling outwards to all beings, including, maybe for me, I always include the trees. But what this can cultivate on a regular basis, if we're doing this regularly, is that naturally and very, very spontaneously, we'll start to respond to life with greater care and spaciousness and ease and generosity. But initially, often when we try to hold other people who trigger us in our hearts, there can be some spite and jealousy and envy, or we can feel very frazzled and agitated, or our temper gets the best of us. And so that's why it's steady, consistent practice that changes us over time. So you do 5 minutes of it a day. You choose one of the Brahma Vihara. And you can practice it through the day if you think about it, especially mudita. That's a good one to kind of practice through the day. But then you can follow more structured formats of moving through the gradations and the spheres of people in your life, and extending them these qualities and wishing them well. If you think about someone who's suffering, wish them well. Yeah.
I was just going to say, we have a question that actually leads on from what you're saying. So the question it's from Jada, and it's one of the concepts that struck me as a distinction between compassion and pity. You said with compassion comes spaciousness, and it seems some form of ease rather than being burdened. Would you be able to say more about this? I struggle with noticing my privilege and not feeling a need to somehow be self-sacrificial or working harder to support others as I'm in a better place, for example.
What comes to mind is something that my meditation teacher said: better to count your blessings than your curses. Yeah, in terms of that, it's good to be self-critical, but it doesn't help anyone in the world to pile on shame, blame, and guilt to oneself. Whatever conditions and circumstances have brought us into the place where we're at now are the conditions and circumstances, and then how we're responding at the present moment to whatever's unfolding is our choice. And we can respond with compassion. We can respond with compassion towards ourselves if there is that judgment and shame, or a sense of privilege, and not to create more drama around it, which would then maybe kind of become a catalyst for just inadequacy, or it feels a sense of, but there's so many problems in the world, and other people have so many more problems than I do. I don't like this about myself, and that just gets fueled, but that doesn't help the world. So to create a sense of, there is this kind of springboard, I feel, that when we practice with these qualities, they remove tension, and they're actually great, like a kind of medicine for social conflict, and they start to heal a lot of wounds that we have, because we're feeling that whatever difficulties other people are going through, we're standing in solidarity with them. We're not saying, we have more kind of more of a hand up, or we're debasing ourselves in order to feel aligned with them. Like, that doesn't help anyone, I don't think. But what we can offer is just genuine and sincere well wishes, and genuine and sincere feeling of, I feel what you're going through. You know, I feel the difficulty, and this is a human quality, and we suffer. Everybody is suffering, and actually there's a lot of the same kind of friction behind the suffering. And if we pare it back, it comes back to a lot of the same sources and feelings of, do I feel loved? Do I feel cared for? Sending oneself metta and sending others metta can often reduce some of that friction. There's actually a really good quote that I pulled up from a guy who is a Theravada Buddhist practitioner. He does a lot of translations from the Buddhist Publication Society in Sri Lanka. I think he's originally German, but he wrote that the Brahmavihara, they level social barriers, build harmonious communities, awaken slumbering magnanimity long forgotten, revive joy and hope long abandoned, promote human brotherhood against the forces of egoism. And he was kind of pointing at the fact that a mind that is orientating and inclined towards these states of compassion and sympathetic joy, of equanimity and of love, is a mind that begins to exclude hate, comparison, shame, things that divide us.
And I think that feels so resonant and relevant for right now, doesn't it? We've had a challenging year all round, and it might feel, I was just thinking when you were talking about that sense of joy, that it might feel, and even of guilt and shame, that it might feel wrong to feel joyful at a time of pain, even if you're feeling joyful for someone else, or with all the conflict we've seen as well. It's about, how do we meet the difficulties of this year, and how but in fact within that quote is, I think, lies an answer.
Yeah, I think it is, or I feel that, with the incredible kind of weight of what is an inevitable calamity in our lives, like it or not, our lives have changed. They will be changed. Whether that is continuing through the pandemic and afterwards, or with the environment, or with increasing political polarization, or with the intractable kind of racism and social divisions and social inequalities and gender inequalities. I think it's to meet them in a way that doesn't close ourselves off to feeling them, and doesn't close ourselves off to our ability to respond, and very importantly, doesn't close ourselves off to seeing beauty and seeing the vibrancy and importance of coming together, celebrating, of creating like a positive, for lack of a better word, vibration. And I think a lot about, for example, people who describe themselves as Indigenous in America, and their spiritual practices have gotten stronger and stronger through calamity, and through systematic racism. In so many kind of ethnic communities, Black America, for example, Black communities in the UK, it's the movement of the body, it's dance, that is a celebration of and a reclaiming of the body, right? And there can be rage and there can be anger, but that does not exclude the full spectrum of being human. And I think what the Brahma Vihara offer us is the widening perspective and the pulling back of the lens to not get so tunneled into the pain and the difficulty, but to keep the love, keep the care, and keep the joy, and use that as medicine to meet the anger and the hatred that is also there, and that is whether we like it or not is kind of what we have to face. So I think it is about awakening the heart, and the heart is not just about sunsets and pretty loving Hallmark cards. The heart is, you heard me say this a lot, the heart is equipped to hold paradox. The heart, when we open and awaken the heart, it's very different from our mind. Our brain does not like inconclusive situations, does not like lack of it hates illogical things. It reads the news and it gets all wound up and tense because how do we fix it, right? Or how can this still be happening? Our mind just gets tight because it doesn't like things that are irrational and unclear. Whereas the heart is very different. When we awaken the heart, we're actually awakening the heart to hold paradox. This is really profoundly a shift for me to remember, because when I meet the news of my heart, my mind goes right, but my heart can be, there's the news, and here's my breath. Here's my health. Here's the fact that I'm holding a device that sends me the news. I mean, there's just so many things that I could be delighted about at the same time that there is pain and suffering. I'm petting my cat and I'm reading about potentially, Supreme Court nomination getting passed, and the reproductive rights of women changing forever for a very long time in the United States. But here's my cat. Right? and so the heart can hold both, whereas the head goes, forget about the cat. Oh my God, what's going to happen to the future of the United States? Brahma Viharas are pointing us towards heart, awakening the heart, awakening that capacity for equanimity to hold all things, the beautiful cat and the difficult news.
And you can hold that paradox. I remember you talking about the heart holding paradox in a class, and that was another light bulb moment. And then I think I went out somewhere and someone annoyed me, as people do. And then in that moment, though, I thought, I can be really annoyed with what you're saying, but I can also still like you as a person at the same time, and you can both you can hold both at once, and it doesn't have to be like, no, I want nothing to do with you because what you're saying is ridiculous. Or you can say, I don't agree, but you're still, you have a point that you believe in, which is tough, isn't it? And sometimes we get that a lot from the news, and it can be hard to hold both sides of.
Yeah, and what the heart of the Buddha's teachings point us to is that there is suffering in the world. This has been true probably since we had the consciousness to know it. There's suffering in the world, but then there is a cause to it. There's an origin to our suffering. And this is so helpful to know, because then it gives us agency to respond to the cause. Okay, what's caused this? Why am I upset? Why is he upset? Why is she upset? What's happening? Then there's the path. There's a way to kind of reduce that, or even do away with the clinging and the things that cause our suffering. And then there's the end of suffering. These are classically known as the Four Noble Truths. But what this points to is impermanence and letting go. That we are part of a fluid, changing, dynamic, ever responsive relationship of things, interconnection and interwoven experience of what's happening in my experience and what's happening around me. And we get into trouble when we think it's fixed. And then mind goes, but I want it this way, right? Or I don't like it that way. And we start this cycle of, rigidity and kind of pushing ourselves up against something that we think is kind of fixed and permanent, but actually, everything shifts and changes. And so, the Brahma-Vihara ultimately they're helping us to create this capacity for these qualities that open our hearts and that give us the insight into the very challenging truth, that nothing is permanent. Everything is part of a fluid, changing expression and experience, moment to moment. And how can we align more and more with this as we move through life? And it's not to be perfect. And that's the beauty of it. It's simply at the heart. It's to understand what it is that makes us more human, or makes us human, and then give us the tools to respond to it. And my choice, is I want to respond in a way that allows me to feel more capable of caring for the world and caring for what I love and who I love, and doing it in a way that hopefully doesn't cause harm, and being gentle towards myself when I do unintentionally cause harm, because I will. And I'll slip up like anyone, and you will slip up. And it's the sense of being gracious and generous, and then cultivating that steadfastness where we can, so that we can respond to a world that's in a lot of pain. My heart breaks many times a day. But I also feel incredible joy many times a day. I think I wouldn't want it any other way.
And could you talk so we've talked a little bit about what these mean, and we've talked a little bit about having a formal approach to, I guess, cultivating some of these qualities. But how do people incorporate them into their lives? Is it by, and they're most commonly taught as a meditation practice rather than within a movement practice. But you spoke about communities using a bodily celebration as a way of evoking and exploring these. So this is the most muddled question ever. Not because I'm asking two in one, but it would really. Could you talk a little bit about incorporating these within a movement practice, but also in maybe stepping into our day-to-day lives rather than sitting on a cushion, let's say, when we can cultivate the feelings, but then boom, we're in the Tesco queue and no one's wearing masks and you feel enraged and then you get splashed and
or you feel enraged that people are wearing masks.
Or exactly, you feel enraged that people are wearing masks. So how do we deal with all of that? And then you feel just sad because the world has changed and you wanted it to be like it was 8 months ago, and then you think, how can I be joyful when people are dying or have lost their jobs? So how do we practically do all this? It's a bit like, the head understands that it can be done, but what are the steps we can take?
It's not very linear though, Raki. Yeah. you just do the practice, and for me, the practices are inextricable from the body, and that's why movement for me is the foundation for understanding. Anything in my consciousness is first put through the field of everything that's here. It's not just happening here. It's through my cells and my enzymes and my sensations and different things that I hear or smell or taste and feel. And when we're moving, it's one of the richest opportunities to respond to what's arising, and I'm a proponent of slow movement for that reason, because if you're driving through a pedestrian area in a big city, the speed limit is slow because there's a lot of things coming at you that could be injured, or you could get into accidents. And so, when we're moving, there's so much that is kind of arising in our sensory experience that we want to move slowly enough so that we're able to respond to the various things arising. And, you could very easily in mudita practices work with, I can't do this. If you're in a class or you think of someone else who can, mudita, they can do it really well. It's not about me. It's just, I'm seeing, someone else enjoy that. Or, but more deeply, it's just, in our bodies, there are built-in moments of rest and pause that give us the capacity to respond. And when we feel challenged or thinking, or bored, this happens a lot on online classes that aren't live. You can switch it off or you can fast forward. I don't like this part. Kind of boredom or disinterest can get the best of you and you don't stick with it, right? And then if you're practicing with the Brahma Viharas, it's like, there's a little bit of, basically that's a little bit of suffering, and compassion towards your suffering. There's impatience. May my impatience be held gently and quieted. May my heart feel open to allow for that impatience or to allow for the discomfort. And then how do I best respond? Well, I might respond with, okay, steady, and stand in appreciation and solidarity of that. and maybe not push as far. Maybe do something different. But there's a lot that we can integrate from our practice, and metaphors galore translate into everyday life. Because what we do in meditation, what we do in movement is kind of a small laboratory and an example of how we generally tend to be in our normal lives. If we tend to get a little bit impatient, or we tend to struggle and self-sabotage when we can't do something, like, chances are that same pattern will be playing out in our other interactions and, normal whatever life. So it's a chance to kind of sense, feel, articulate, render what that experience is, and it's practice. It's time to kind of sit with it and sense it, and then over time, as we practice, we just develop more resilience, but also hopefully stronger hearts and healthier bodies. And when our body is feeling better, our whole kind of being can be just a little more equipped to meet what's in front of us. And maybe in our practice, if we're slowing down, we can also slow down a little bit in our conversations and our interactions with people, or the news, or social media. Before we type in that kind of slightly snarly comment in response to something, we can mudita, karuna, upeka, whatever you want, metta.
Absolutely, and I think Pat's commented on slow movement, saying, I found slow movement provides pauses to notice. It's made a profound difference to practice, and the transferability into day-to-day life seems easier. And I'll just sort of say, yeah, I completely echo that. And I've noticed recently that I've been rushing through every single practice I do. I don't know, it's a bit like, I don't know, there's a bear going to come onto my yoga mat, eat me alive, so I have to do the yoga first. I've been doing Qigong, and it's been like, normally it's dreamy, but then it's like, so, but when I noticed that, and I thought, maybe I should just slow down, take a few breaths, and it's, in fact, it's like transform my whole day, because there was obviously, and I'm thinking here, it's probably because I want to, get over this whole tricky period of time the world's going through. Some, maybe if I speed up all my vinyasas and rush through all my practices, then we could get through it. But I've now realized that that's not the way, but actually slowing down makes such a difference. And I noticed someone commenting on how challenging it was in one of your classes to do it slowly, and in fact the movements aren't particularly challenging within the series of classes, but it is the speed that we can find really difficult, particularly in our kind of very crazy speeded up world now, where we get everything instantly, and we don't want to wait for the book to arrive, so we have it on a device, and slowing down is tough, isn't it? And yet I think what you've said about compassion and joy and being faster than our conditioning, and the only way you can do that is by slowing down, really.
Yeah. And
isn't it? You can't.
To remember that movement practice is, it's the opposite of instant gratification. Usually, if you really want to land it in something that will last, it's like all holistic medicines, Chinese medicine included in that. It's a gradual healing process. And if you've come to movement from kind of a faster life, adrenalized, caffeined. I like to think of how people these days like to express mail themselves over the finish line to happiness and health. But that's just not nature speed. And nature speed is medium to slow. I don't know. I can't remember who said that. It was like Thoreau or Emerson or one of these like good-natured people, poets who like nature. One of these guys who'd spent a lot of time out there. But we want instant or quick results, and affecting our body, our health, our mental or physical health. If we think of ourselves as part of nature, nature grows things gradually. Giant pine grows from a tiny sprout in Tao Te Ching. Right? The journey of 1,000 miles starts from beneath your feet. And I think of that a lot because it's a good model. It's a good teacher. Nature is our best teacher. And,
absolutely.
Yeah, and sometimes in evolution, there's something called punctuated equilibrium, where there's suddenly like a spike in diversification and creativity. But you're talking over 6 billion years. Occasionally, like something like that happens. It's we can get riddled by the kind of clinging and wanting and needing kind of right now and what's important to us right now, and worrying about what's going to happen in the election or what's going to happen tomorrow or next. We can't make any plans, and it's like, you know what, don't worry about it, because we're around for however long we're here, but things will keep going. It's a small speck, and it's humbling, but it's the truth. It's like 6 billion years. In another 100 years, another 1,000 years, will it really matter?
Yeah, and
it matters infinitely right now, because who knows how time works. So you do your best, right?
And you practice, as you said, because it's called a practice. It's not just called a 1-minute race. It's a practice. So keep doing it. So we've been talking for.
I know. It's time.
So easy to do. And I could talk to you all day, but.
Oh, thanks, Jackie.
But
so nice.
Thank you so much, Mimi. It's been really amazing to unpick some of these practices that are both simple and profound, all at the same time. But I think it's they are there, aren't they, within us to explore and befriend. So it's been brilliant. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Raki. And Kat, nice to see you come on for a bit. And others, any questions that people have that haven't been?
I think we've answered all the questions that have popped up. So we've got Jada saying, thank you so much. Thoroughly enjoyed this and the practices. But I think we've answered all the questions that have been typed in. But if anyone does have any questions and they pop them in, I'm sure you'll be able to take a look. But lots of people are saying thank you, and they've really enjoyed listening and enjoyed the introduction. So these are practices that are new as well, that people are discovering. So it's been really helpful to really kind of drill down and understand them. Lisa saying, I think you've given everyone food for thought. So I can see there are a lot of people watching and just taking it all in.
Yeah, and it's just to say the richness is just so palpable for me of what these practices offer, and especially in a time that we're in now, I think we need to, or we don't have to do anything, but it would be a real contribution to the world, I think, for us to pick these practices up and hold our experiences gently and with intimacy and with greater awareness and skills. Because if we don't do it, the people who are leading a lot of the governments in the world aren't doing it. A lot of people in decision-making positions aren't doing it. This is a group of people who are keen to and open to shifts, positive shifts, and do what you can. It's a critical junction, and time was infinite. Yeah, stay vast.
Stay fast.
And stay detailed. This is also the beauty of what we're here to explore. So thanks, Raki, and thank you everyone for your comments. Great to see so many of you engaged.
Yeah. And we'll see you all soon.
Much love to everyone. Take care and be safe.